Now we're going to talk about how the mass media, big news media, in their attempt to make it look like everything's fine and this is the best time to be alive on one side, and on the other side pretending everything's falling apart but for reasons that make absolutely no fucking sense. I'm going to tell you how this creates hatred. So, on one hand, you have fear-mongering media that wants you to hate immigrants or minorities or poor people or whatever. What if if we let the immigrants in, then they're going to steal our jobs, and since they're paid less, we can't compete with them. But what they don't want you to fucking ask is, who pays them less? You know, it's not just magic that the immigrants are paid less. Somebody decided to pay them less. You know, if it wasn't the case that they were paid less because we made it, I don't know, illegal or something, then there wouldn't be a problem now, would there? Instead of hating Silicon Valley and Wall Street for orchestrating de-industrialization and creating this de facto surveillance state that can know practically everything about you is everywhere, and will eventually come to the point where coding is the only job left, everybody else is living on UBI that's meager, and that we have no power to do anything because we have no jobs and under constant surveillance. Instead of hating those people, this media, like all big media, is funded by them, so they tell you to hate somebody else, waste your time, hate somebody else who had nothing to do with it. What, you think poor people, immigrants, and minorities orchestrated this? That's retarded. People with almost no money and no power would not be able to do this. That's fucking stupid. And what the other news is like the generic liberal news, like CNN or something like that. So they've got to pretend like everything's fine because they're paid to, essentially. You know, they respond to what the other side, in quotations, news talks about, and act like those are about the only problems. And so you see all the news media coverage ends up being essentially about the only things that have gotten better over those past 40 years, which are queer rights and racial rights. You know, they gotta pretend like everything's fine and this is the best time to be alive, even though de-industrialization's just completely fucked everything. They can't come out and say that, because they're paid by the people who made money off of it and continue to make money off of our suffering. You know, they can't talk about how bad de-industrialization really fucked us. They can't talk about these real economic issues facing us because they're paid by the people who made money off of orchestrating de-industrialization, who made fuck tons of money off of it. So what they essentially do is they hold up, see, everything's fine, this is the best time to be alive, and they hold up better queer and to some extent racial rights as their reasoning for that. But what it leaves out is if you're like me, like one of the 90% of straight people who are watching the news, that hasn't been an issue for you. That doesn't directly affect you the same way that this horrible de-industrialization has affected basically everyone. So it breeds resentment when people watch this and they see issues that affect a relatively small percentage of the population being covered, yet ours, that affects practically everybody not being covered at all, like they don't exist. This does two things. One, it breeds resentment in people who watch this. Not everybody, but a portion of them. It depends how exposed and how connected to these issues they are, of course. Like maybe if it's not them, maybe if it's a friend of theirs, though, that's in one of these groups, then even though they'll be annoyed with the media cynically covering it, because they don't really care, they're just in it for the money, it won't turn into hatred the same way it will with other people who maybe have no connection to these issues. So when they see this, they might get irritated or angry, and that's like the first step in breeding hatred, because then they can be talked to by these strange type of people who have some really wacky views on race and stuff like that. You know the type of people I'm talking about. And the second thing that this does is it creates this plastic feel to the world, since, one, what they're being told that everything's fine and this is the best time to be alive doesn't match the actual reality of rising costs of living, stagnant wages, jobs that are meaningless and produce nothing, a horrible surveillance state being built up, horrible costs of rent, no prospects for any future, crippling loneliness, that doesn't mesh with what they've been told on these media outlets. So it creates this plastic feel to the world, and I'm sure you've heard people talk about this. This is one of the reasons leading into this. And what also contributes from the media people who get on there and tell you about it to this plastic feel is the fact that it's insincere, that it's all fake, that it's just for show, just so that they can pretend like the world's better than it was 40 years ago, even though it's not. Like they can pretend like everything's fine, and because they make money off of it. They don't actually care about queer or racial rights at all. They don't care about them at all. It's just that supporting them doesn't cost them any money. You know, supporting like actual economic issues that we're facing, that would cost the people who pay their paychecks, and by extension them, money. Because they're the ones who made money off of doing de-industrialization, off of fucking us over with this. They're the only ones who've made money off of it. So they can't talk about those issues because it would cost them money. But queer and racial rights, those cost them no money at all. And I'm not saying that these issues aren't important. That's not what I'm saying at all. If you get that out of this video, you're fucking retarded. What I'm saying is that the fake and cynical way that these media outlets on the liberal side of things cover these issues to the exclusion of the diseases of deindustrialization breeds resentment and possibly hatred toward the very groups that they pretend to be supporting. And if you point these out to some people, some brain-dead liberals, but they're like, oh, but what, you don't care about these issues? And of course we fucking care about these issues, but they're not the only issues in the fucking world. And cynically supporting them is doing more harm than good. And the media outlets, right-wing and left-wing, so to speak, they're not really at all. They're basically just the same thing. They pretend, like CNN will pretend to hate Fox News, but all the stories that they come up with are about Fox News, and they make money off of those. Or about something the right, in quotations, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean today. It's all about crazy stuff that the right's doing, and these, like, don't say gay bills and all this shit. And I'm not saying these issues aren't important, but they play off of each other is what I'm getting at. They make each one side makes money off of the other in a closed loop. Just like how all the media outlets on the liberal side, they pretended to despise Trump, but they actually loved the guy because they all got crazy stories that they could do on him. And it made them tons of money because they got tons of views when they did that. So we've all seen that graph that shows supposed productivity continuing to go up while wages basically just stagnate. But as I've been telling you, the jobs that we have now don't really produce any real value. They just move shit around or duplicate useless apps that do nothing. Our jobs don't build any real stuff anymore. So has productivity really gone anywhere either? Well, they essentially define productivity as like profit or hours worked or something, but you can dig a hole and fill it back in, and that takes work, but it doesn't really accomplish anything. So nothing's really produced. But you're not supposed to think about it. You're supposed to think of it as if an economy can grow and everybody be fine on jobs that don't produce jack shit and do nothing. But that's not the case. I mean, if you're alive right now, then you know that's not the case. Because over these past 40 years, wages have been stagnant while costs of living have risen. And it must just be a magic coincidence that this happened right when deindustrialization shot us. But they don't want you to question that, because Silicon Valley and Wall Street, they made fuck tons of money off of it. And they got to fund big money douchebag studies and institutes that make it out like everything's fine. Fudge some numbers, define things differently to get the outcomes that you want. And only publish the papers that work out in your favor. And they've got big names, big fancy degrees, and big colleges behind them. So it all looks legit to somebody who doesn't know what's going on. But it leaves behind a nasty taste in the mouth. Because when you look around you, that's not the case at all. High rent costs, high costs of living, low pay, no job prospects. All these jobs are shit jobs in Amazon or Walmart or Kroger. Crippling loneliness, depression, constantly being on call all the time because, you got a cell phone now, so that means we can call you in any time when we need somebody. The reality does not match the bullshit that they're feeding us. And anybody knows that, even if it's just on a subconscious level. They know something's off here, something feels fake, kind of corporate-y, that awful corporate blue color, you know the one I'm talking about. They know something's off. And they keep throwing around innovation and entrepreneurship like it's magic fairy dust that's going to fix all these problems. Look, they had 40 years. They're the ones who created the problems, but if they're supposedly going to innovate us out of them, they've had 40 years to do it and they did nothing. The only innovations that have been made is new ways to bullshit us and try to trick us into thinking everything is fine. Look, it's clear that an economy can't continue to grow and be successful for most people or everybody if we don't produce any real shit. The whole point of an economy is to produce things. But what have we produced? I mean, there's some things we still produce here, but not nearly as many as they were. And again, don't count fucking apps on that, because it's a one-time cost to produce an app, and then you can copy it endlessly as many fucking times as you want for basically zero cost. They can't cut our wages here, because we still have at least enough power to keep them from them just being, okay, we're just going to cut your wages down to what they are in China and India, because that would piss too many people off. There would be mass riots and stuff. So they let inflation do the work for them. It takes effort in politics to get minimum wage bills passed. And when you fund both parties, it's pretty easy to stop that from happening. So inflation does the work. It's a slow kind of death, like the frog boiling in the pot. You set a frog in it. Supposedly, if you set a frog in boiling water, it'll jump out. But if you set it in cold water and slowly heat it, the frog will stay there until he cooks to death. That's what's been happening with our living standards here. And they got to make it slow enough so that people don't really notice all at once, and that they can continue bullshitting you, because things get worse over 40 years. 40 years is a really long time. I'm not 40 years old either, so I haven't been around for all of it. Over time, our standards of living will continue to fall until eventually they reach the bottom, where China and India are, or wherever they will be in the point in the future. And when you see one of these people on the media, they're like, oh, I'm an economist from Harvard or something. 99% of the people who say they're economists and are on the media, they're just bullshit artists, okay? Because conveniently the policies they always support always end up involving more of the same free trade bullshit, and embrace the service economy, and embrace Silicon Valley, big tech, embrace the tech industry, learn coding. All the policies they conveniently come up with, they're all more of the same shit that's made us worse off over the past 40 years. They're all the same shit that caused de-industrialization. It was all a combination of what happened and planned. They're just basically hired talking heads to look official and have fancy degrees to support the policies that continue to fuck us over, that fucked us over with de-industrialization. And same with all these stupid think tanks. A lot of times the people there don't even have real degrees in what they're supposed to be experts in. They're just funded by other people so they can conveniently come up with the ideas that the people who funded them want them to come up with. And it look official, and it look like, oh, it's not my ideas, it's the think tank's ideas. Look, the truth is simple. Deindustrialization fucked us over. If you're alive and have eyeballs right now, you can see that. And no amount of bullshit papers and bullshit fake douchebag experts should be able to fool you out of that. And we're told, oh, the economy's grows 2 or 3% a year. Oh, the stocks are up. Oh, the economy's doing well. The economy's growing slowly, but it's growing. But where the fuck is this growth? Because I haven't seen it. I know you haven't seen it either. Then it's right there. Oh, it's the stock market. That's where the money is. Fucking Wall Street and Silicon Valley. When they talk about the economy on the news, what they're really talking about is their own fucking big money douchebaggery. They don't give a shit about you. They're not, when they make those reports, they're basically only talking about themselves, because for themselves, yeah, they've made more money. They're always making more fucking money. They're making money off of our fucking misery and suffering. The economy that we experience hasn't gone anywhere, right? But down, really. But, they're going to use their bullshit ways of measuring things to pretend like everything's fine and the economy's getting better, even if it slowly is. Or, did you know that this is true? Officially, the coronavirus recession, according to the U.S. government, it was the shortest recession on record, and it only lasted 3 months. Meanwhile, in reality, 2008 never ended. Another thing we've been seeing in recent years is a rise in conspiracy theorists. We know that Bill Gates can't actually put microchips in the vaccines. Hopefully you know that. We don't have small enough microchips yet. But the reasoning behind it, that these conspiracy theorists believe that he would do that, that's pretty accurate. Like, if Bill Gates could put microchips in vaccines and get away with it, he absolutely would, because it would make him a fuck ton of money. And don't fall into the trap that, oh, these billionaires are so charitable because they gave away this or that and many millions of dollars. Well, first off, you fucking retard if you think that. That's only a very tiny percentage of their wealth if you actually sit there and do the math. And on top of that, that's all tax deductible. So think about it from Bill Gates' point of view. He could either pay the $1 million, let's just say it's $1 million because it's a simple example, but let's just say he could pay the $1 million in taxes and get basically nothing out of it. Or he could donate it as a charity thing instead of just giving it up in taxes. And then he gets to tout around on the media like he's this awesome charitable person, even though it was just a simple calculation. Okay, I can either get nothing out of it or I can at least get some publicity out of it. And on top of that, even, when these people have like the Bill and Melinda Gates Fund or whatever the fuck it's called now, only like 5% a year of that fund actually needs to be donated in order for the rest of it to be completely tax exempt. Makes you think a little bit, huh? I don't remember if it's a year or whatever, but you get the idea. That's generally how it works. So whenever people try to point to all the charity these people are doing, you need to tell them that it's all just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. It's all bullshit. These people are the people who fucked us over with de-industrialization. These people are the only people who made money off of it. The rest of us have just been fucked over. Our lives have gotten worse since de-industrialization. And these are the people who fund the papers and the big money douchebag institutes that conveniently always find studies that everything is fine. This is the best time to be alive. Or, oh, we've got problems, but they're minor problems. We can fix it with innovation and entrepreneurship. Nowadays, the word innovation just means magic fucking fairy dust that's supposed to fix everything. It used to actually mean something, and now it means smartphone, smart tech bullshit. And people tell you, oh, but these people are job creators. Job creators in China, you fucktard. And they point to like, oh, they've created the coding jobs and stuff. Well, you remember that example from the last video, the 1,000 vodka bottles versus 1,000 mustache on dog apps? So, now say Boris, he's a Russian immigrant who starts a vodka factory, okay? His factory produces 1,000 bottles of vodka every month or whatever. Well, there's a startup cost in this case, and in the case of making the mustache on dog app. Somebody needs to build the factory, the distillery I mean, and somebody needs to code the app in the first place. But you'll notice that with the vodka factory, it's also continuously producing real stuff. It takes real work to turn that glass, this scrap glass, well, starting with sand, probably, turn the sand into glass, and then the glass into bottles. Then, somebody has to grow the crop that gets fermented, and then somebody has to distill it. It continuously employs people, you see? There's continuous value being made by that work. But with the Mustache on Dog app, if they sell 1,000 copies of that app every month, there's no production cost, so nobody's employed by that. Just the original few creators just keep getting to pocket a fuck ton of money, and in this case, say both companies made $1 million in a year. Well, the Mustache and Dog case, there's like maybe 2 or 3 jobs there, and all the money went to like those 2 or 3 people. With the vodka case, there's a lot more people employed. That money gets spread around a lot more because real value is made. I mean, the only reason the Mustache and Dog apps can be sold is because of copyright laws. If it weren't for that, they wouldn't be worth shit, really, because there's no actual cost in making a copy of it. So when they tell you they're job creators, bring that up. Like, are you really? Technically, yeah, they made 2 or 3 jobs versus the other type of companies that we had that made thousands of jobs and spread that value around more and actually made real shit. Today we're going to talk about how to actually start building up a movement, at least in small groups. So, hopefully at least some of you know some people in real life. And I'm sure that if you're watching this channel, there are probably people who have similar problems to you as well, that you can relate to what we've been talking about. You need to start introducing them a bit into what we've been talking about, and start using words like silicuck, words that are associated with our hopefully future movement. Well, that is if they're interested. At least don't pester them endlessly. Depending on who you're talking to, you should rebrand or change like the image or wording of what your key points are, and emphasize different points depending on the issues that whoever you're talking to is facing. You need to really focus on hitting on the point that de-industrialization fucked everything for us. And you need to be able to bring problems back to that we've talked about, like remember how they're connected. You need to help them out as well. You need to actually be there for them. You know, be someone that they can trust, of course, too, because we're trying to build part of a movement is we have to build a bit of a sense of community, because that's one of the key things that's been destroyed by deindustrialization is community. That's why people are lonelier now than ever. So introduce them to these concepts, be there to help them, and they'll be there to help you. And if they then introduce more of their friends into these concepts, talk about these ideas, then we can successfully grow our movements, grow awareness of what's actually going on. But if all we do about it is talk about it online, then it's going to be a lot harder, and we're going to be a lot more dispersed. We're not going to have like real life groups or anything that can actually get together and do much of anything. And we'll also need to develop slogans. They need to be short and easy to remember, yet powerful in their messaging. That's what any good slogan is. And when you talk to people about how deindustrialization fucked everything, how it made people's lives worse by causing rising costs of living in the face of stagnant wages, you need to tell them who's responsible, who did it, and you need to point the finger at Silicon Valley and Wall Street, because they're the only ones who've profited off of this supposed economy that's supposedly growing, yet we're not seeing any of that growth. You know, if necessary, maybe even try to memorize a few key talking points so that you can introduce people into this easier. I mean, it's one thing to watch a YouTube video, but it's another thing to tell people in real life about something. You want to actually come off like you're knowing what you're talking about. You can't be stammering through the whole thing, and you can't mix up your words too much, or that makes you look like you don't know what you're talking about.